Jerry Corder, thank you so much for joining us again here on another episode of Machine Heads, man. How are you doing today?
Good, and thanks for having me. A little cold here in Texas, but
Yeah,
through it.
got cold here in Alabama again. We had a snowstorm and then it was 80 degrees for 2 weeks and now it's in the 30s again. We're
We'll
just
get through
barely
it
hanging
some.
on. Well, Jerry, thank you again so much for making time. You guys at Kubota have been crazy busy, lots of new machine announcements. And specifically today, we're going to talk about one of your new CTLs, the new SVL50x, which is a really exciting and interesting new machine for you guys. But before we get into the specifics on this machine, let's talk a little bit about CTLs in general here. Look at the market a little bit from you guys' perspective. I know a couple of companies that I spoke to over the last kind of 12 months or so said that there was a little bit of slowing maybe in the market, and the overall kind of equipment market, but there wasn't really any kind of impact to CTLs at all. It really has seemed to be an impervious category in a sense, just because it is such a multi-tool. What is you guys' perspective on demand for CTLs, and what have you guys seen, and why is this category seemingly kind of impervious to maybe some of the slowing or the dips in the overall market?
Well, to your point earlier, yeah, there was a softening of the market relative to 2023 and 2024, and CTLs did pretty well. It's such a versatile tool. It's so in demand. I don't want to say it's impervious, but surely it hasn't felt the impact that other machines have.
Okay. I mean, and is it just that kind of we're still not really at the kind of like peak of people either getting maybe the machine that they need? I mean, how long do you guys kind of see this going on?
We're being conservative as Kubota typically is. We'll see what interest rates do and see how that impacts us going forward. We're actually thinking the market's going to be pretty flat this year. So
Okay. All righty. Yeah, I mean, interest rates are definitely kind of there's a lot of other kind of like looming questions in the air for sure when it comes to just kind of pricing and things that'll affect pricing for sure, which customers and, those who are kind of in the market for a machine are definitely going to have to take into account and kind of wait and see over the next 18 months. But it sounds like the demand side of it, in terms of there's still a lot of customers who either are looking to upgrade or looking to kind of refresh, or still maybe just don't yet have the exact thing that they need, right?
yeah, and we're coming out with new bells and whistles all the time, and anything we can do to help make the job go quicker saves money.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go ahead and move on to the main subject, and that is the recently announced SVL50X. We're definitely going to get into the specs and a lot of the details on the machine shortly, but to kind of kick us off into talking about this machine, I did want to talk a little bit about the size, because that's by far kind of like maybe the differentiator in terms of how it sits in the context of the entire kind of CTL lineup that you guys have at Kubota. This is a compact frame machine with just about 50 horsepower, and it feels like it fits in nicely with kind of like there's an overall trend of machines that kind of balance power with getting into tight spaces. You and I have talked a lot about the SCL1000, which is you guys kind of stand on mini skid steer. So that's a machine that doesn't have a cab, and instead you're standing behind it, that traditional kind of mini skid steer thing. There's just been lots of, apart from the compact segment seeing more demand and CTL seeing more demand kind of as like the lead machine in that segment, there's just more and more kind of interest in kind of like, let me get this small machine that I can get into more spaces, up the versatility with tool carrier capability. This kind of feels like maybe it's like the CTL take on that. Whereas for a long time, it just felt like we were getting bigger and bigger and more powerful and more powerful. And those machines still have their place, but now we're starting to see the utility of things that can kind of get into tight spaces. Why is Kubota introducing a machine like the SVL50x now? And was there any of that kind of what we were just talking about, that specific type of customer demand for maybe a smaller machine that you
Sure.
guys are kind of answering with this machine?
Well, look around at residential construction, and lots aren't getting bigger. They're getting smaller and smaller, at least here in Texas and the other places I visited. There's no end in sight for that. We're building more houses on less land. And so Kubota saw that as a need to address that with a smaller machine. So the SVL50X was designed to not specifically, but for the most part, address those small, compact residential sites. So it's 48 inches wide. So it gets through most gates. And on these tiny lots, you're moving around materials that are waiting to be put on a house, roofing materials or whatnot. You've got HVAC systems. There's not a lot of room to maneuver. And if you need to get in the backyard, you need a small machine to do that. And to the point you made earlier, traditionally that's been done with a stand-on machine. So this is a cabbed machine. You can operate it year round in the snow, in the heat. It's air conditioned, and really get back into those areas, whether you're grading an area, whether you're bringing in landscape or other material. That's it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so thinking about the performance and the balanced performance that this machine offers, looking at the spec sheet for this machine, it is also interesting. Again, you've got the 48-inch wide frame, but it's also rated at a really capable, and it's around that 1,000-pound kind of point that the stand-on is at. A little bit more power. It's got 1,176 pounds of operating capacity. It's got 4,900 pounds of breakout force. It's got a really nice hinge pin height of 101 inches. It really does feel like a big brother to the SCL 1000, the stand-on machine. They're pretty comparable in terms of the lift capacity. This machine is obviously slightly larger. It's got the cab and everything, better hinge pin height. It feels like a natural kind of step up from that machine. So, I mean, I think it's been about 4 years since you introduced the stand-on, the mini skid. Did any of what you learned from kind of what customers were looking at of a truly like a smaller compact machine kind of factor in at all in the development of this 50X?
I'm sure there were lessons learned from an engineering and production side. Excuse me. From a market side, being a cabbed machine, it's a whole different animal than a stand-on. From a cost standpoint, if nothing else, it really comes into its own when the weather gets rough. You can keep working. You can keep doing what you're doing. In fact, one of the benefits of a machine this small is snow removal. 4 feet wide, typical sidewalk is 4 feet wide. We have a 4-foot snow blower that fits right on it. We were up in Vermont a couple weeks ago doing some photo shoots, and thing plugs right down a sidewalk and just clears it all off. So we've talked construction, but there are some other applications for something this small as well that are beyond the scope of a normal stand-on machine. So
Gotcha.
It's a big brother in one sense. It's a whole different animal in another.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, you mentioned snow removal. You've mentioned residential. What other kind of things are you guys seeing that this machine really excels at?
So this is a landscaper's dream. So it's just over 5,000 pounds. So a half-ton pickup can tow this thing around where you need it to on a 7,500 pound trailer, and it gets back in the backyards. It gets in the front yard. It's got great lift capacity, and it has some attachments that really help in that market.
Yeah. So there are also kind of multiple configurations for this machine. Could you kind of take us through? There's 4 available configurations. Could you take us
Correct.
through those?
So this has 4 models. There's a base model, which is our only open station model, no real bells and whistles. And then there's 3 varieties, flavors of a cab model that take you from, and there are different features. And, as you go up from, standard to deluxe, for lack of a better term, you get more that comes with the machine rather than having a dealer add it to you separately. And we can dive into those features as we need to. So.
Yeah, I mean, actually in the model name, right, the X stands
Yes.
for some of the kind of extra features that you're getting, I guess, depending on the configuration. So yeah, I mean, like, what are some of there's some extra features that come standard, and then there's kind of the features that you can kind of add based on the configuration. Kind of take us through
So
the X and then the configuration.
About the X, there's some tongue-in-cheek involved in there too, but this machine is different enough from our typical compact track loader that it made sense to kind of set it aside a little bit. And the main reason, this is Kubota's first EH machine. So it's electro-hydraulic control instead of pilot, which we have hung our hat on from the time we've introduced. So that EH allows you to add in features that are really challenging to engineer or just downright impossible to do with a pilot machine. So that's given us more features than we've had in the past. Creep mode comes into play. You can adjust the loader arm speed. There's a number of things that you can do with this machine that you just can't do with the others. So we did away with the dash and made this one just an X, literally for extra. So.
Okay, gotcha. So why on this machine did you guys feel the kind of that was it just kind of thinking about, okay, this is a smaller machine. These are the types of things we want to do with the smaller machine. It makes the EH kind of unlocks some of those things. Is that kind of like the thought
Yeah.
behind it?
This is going to be a niche machine, just period. It's tiny, it's performance. If you need lift capacity, and that's your primary concern, you don't want a 50, you want something bigger. So this being more of a niche machine, I don't know if this is accurate or not, but I think we've kind of used it as a proof of concept. What can we do with this that we can't or haven't done with others, and see where it goes, see how well we can make this work.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, so it sounds kind of like the philosophy is still that for the vast majority of contractors or operators who are hopping into the cab of a CTL, the experience that you guys want to deliver is still kind of hinges on the feel and the control that you get with Pilot, right? Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, and so since this is a little bit more of a specialty machine, the makes a little bit more sense. Plus, you get the added benefit of too, if this is going to be like a big rental machine or even kind of like an entry level machine, it's a nice kind of like gentle introduction to kind of like getting started, right?
It is, I want to take a side note. This thing is a go-kart, man. This thing does 10 miles an hour. So you raised my hackles a little bit when you said an entry-level machine. This is
Apologies.
No. This is it gets up and goes, and it does a lot of work fast. It's but has a lot of features built in. I mentioned you can adjust the loader arm speed, you can adjust the track response. You can really tailor this and dial it in to the experience level, preferences, or needs of any customer you have. Yeah. So
Did you guys have any kind of motivation or maybe desire to be like, all right, if we're going to do an EH machine, is there anything we can do electronically to kind of tune this thing to feel as much like a Pilot machine as we can? Or did you guys really lean into the feel of the feel of EH?
there's a definite feel to a Kubota that is, I don't want to say it's missing, but an EH machine, when I get in, I can tell, that there's a bit of a delay in the controls as the electronics do their thing. And it's present in this. You get, it is what it is, and we'll refine it and you'll get used to it over time. So.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's one of those things with EH that, like you said, it'll get better over time, but it definitely is kind of a tough engineering kind of thing to figure out. I think what I've heard ultimately though is that the companies that have, because some have made the switch completely with all their new machines. They're like, yeah, Pilot controls are cool, but they are basically prioritizing, I guess, not just the feature add that you can do with those machines, but just the full control over the harness that just making the switch kind of unlocks in terms of being able to lock down or open up everything with software, which is a choice for sure. But I know that there's lots of guys out there that are super happy that Kubota is still, on the Pilot side.
There's no getting around the fact that EH has its advantages. And Pilot has its advantages in proportional feel. It's a business decision which way you want to go and what you want to do with it, what your customers want to do with it. And fortunately, a lot of Kubota customers love that feel that we give, and it does the job for them. So,
what are some of the features or the individual features? You mentioned the three different You've got the base model, and you've got the three configurations of the closed cab model. What are some of the extra additional features that you're getting or that separate those three different configurations?
Sure. So if it has a cab with 50X, it comes with air conditioning. That's something that we made a decision to. KSR is something that's available on Kubota Shockless Ride. On the higher end, on the deluxe model, the reversing camera is standard on it, available on others, but it just comes standard. So it's things like that. So the more of those dealer installed options come standard from the factory on the deluxe.
A shockless ride is something that we'll address on another machine, maybe a little bit more in depth. The 97-3, which is your largest and your newest version of your largest machine. Tell us a little bit about shockless ride, though, for the folks that might be interested in it for this machine.
So Kubota shockless ride, it's a built-in accumulator in the loader arm hydraulics. Its intent was to, as you're going over uneven terrain, it buffers the bucket. So you're keeping your material in the bucket as you're going over bumps, hills, curbs, whatnot. It has a side benefit. It does offer some cushioning to the cab, so it does improve the ride somewhat. But its intended benefit is to keep material in the bucket.
Okay, absolutely. Thinking about some of the interior of this machine. Obviously, if you go for the enclosed cab, you have the nice slide up door that a lot of folks really, really love instead of the one that kind of hinges outward. Not only kind of saving space, but just making entry and exit and even getting like a better view to the ground where you're kind of working. So, and on a small machine like this, the added, benefit of having that slide up door of getting in and out, but then also being able to kind of like look at tight quarters is going to be huge. But being inside the machine, kind of like, could you give us a little bit more, what's kind of going on inside? What can they expect from the interior of this machine?
Sure. When you're thinking comfort in this machine, the first thing that comes to mind, it's 48 inches wide, but it's easy to get in and out of because of that overhead door. And it just feels like a lot of space. We showed this at our dealer meeting, and we had a guy who was 6'10", 6'11". I mean, he was just huge, and hopped in this thing, could close the door. He didn't have leg room, but he could close the door,
That's
On a
important.
machine this small, a gentleman that size could get in and operate the machine. A person my size, 6 feet tall, I get in and I've got all the space I need on the side, front to back.
The
It's
ultimate
nice.
challenge at the dealer meeting, fitting this massive human into this one of the smallest machines you make.
No,
Talk about a
but that's,
stress test.
you look at this thing from outside and it's tiny. And the fact that you can hop in, operate, and it feels much bigger inside than you expect it to. I mean, when it comes to comfort, that's first and foremost, just that you can fit in this thing and operate. It's also a one-piece cab. I don't think I've mentioned that so far. So we introduced a one-piece cab with the SVL50x3. It's pressurized. It keeps out dirt, dust, and water, so it's a clean place, but it also insulates, so it's a quieter work environment as well. And obviously, if your operator's comfortable and happy, he's going to be productive and he's going to show up day to day. So those are some of the thought processes that go on as we're putting comfort together. We've already addressed some of the technology that's in it. It has a touch screen. It's keyless start. That touch screen and keyless starter, whether it's an open station or a cab model, and then everything goes through that touch screen, from your machine vitals to coupling and decoupling from attachments, start and stop. There's a master switch and there's a throttle, and those are the only controls in the cab outside of that touchscreen. So it's well done. 7 inches is plenty big, and it's right in front of you.
Yeah. What are some of the, could you give us an idea of kind of the I guess, implementation through software? Like, what are some of the specific kind of features or control features that has really enabled in the 50X?
So creep mode is the first thing that we put in. So if you're operating with a trencher, which is a landscapers and construction would do, snow blowers sometimes, you can slow this thing down to a crawl and adjust the speed even on creep somewhat, so that you can go from crawl up to your top speed in low range. And this does have a 2-speed, by the way. And that's the first thing that we came up with. Also, I mentioned earlier the adjustable loader arm speed. You can turn that way down or way up if you need it to go faster. These are things that each enabled us to put into the machine.
Cool. And then let's talk about maintenance a little bit. You mentioned the one-piece pressurized cab, which is obviously fantastic, but what should we know about the maintenance around this machine?
So a lot of thought went into this engine compartment. When you open up the back door, you've got your battery, your fluid fills, and your filters are all right there at your fingertips. It's 48 inches wide, so it doesn't have what you could call a roomy engine bay. It's just not in the cards. But a lot of thought went into the design to make routine maintenance as easy, convenient as possible. Because let's face it, if it's a hassle to maintain the machine, oftentimes it doesn't get done, and we want to make sure this machine is ready day in and day out. Another thing, that one-piece cab you mentioned, 2 bolts, and it lifts up and out of the way, no panels, anything underneath to your machine hydraulics are right at your fingertips. It's an assisted lift as it is on the 75, so one person picks it up, it locks it in place, and you can go to work. And with the back door open and the cab up, clean out's a breeze with a leaf blower or whatever you need to.
Awesome. Well, Jerry, that's just about all the questions that I had on this new SVL50X, but I'm going to give you the last word. Is there anything else that you want Kubota customers or people who are interested in this machine to know? And then where should they go to get that information?
Sure. Well, this is a new challenge for us. We're excited about the 50X and what this does for customers. It opens new doors for us, and we're excited about that. As you have questions or if you want more information, go to KubotaUSA.com, or by all means stop in by one of our dealers and see what we can do for you.
Awesome. Jerry, thank you again for making some time for us today on Machine Heads. We'll do it again very soon, hopefully.
Thank you, Wayne. I'm always happy to talk machines with you.
Awesome. Thanks, Jerry.